This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News9. English news as it should be.
Very good morning. You're watching News9. I'm Karthik Malhotra. A lot lined up on the show this morning. To begin with, the big story coming in early morning as US President Donald Trump has announced a 25% tariff on all countries trading with Iran. We'll bring you details on that story also on the show. Pax Silica, what does it mean for India, and could this potentially be a deal sweetener for India to go ahead and agree to the US terms to stitch up the India-US trade deal? And of course, mixed cues coming in for the markets. Yesterday, we saw a major bump up owing to Sergio Gor, the new US ambassador in India, saying that a trade deal could be very much on the anvil. But this morning, the reports on Iran trade and 25% tariffs could potentially spoil the mood for Indian oil majors, at least. That and more on this edition of Morning Brief at 9. This is Morning Brief at 9. First up, let's look at all the headlines we're tracking for you this morning. US President Donald Trump announces sweeping 25% tariff on all countries trading with Iran, raising stakes for India and China and reviving fears of a fresh global trade war. Over 600 killed and nearly 10,700 arrested as Iran's anti-government protests rage under internet blackout, with Tehran saying it is prepared for war but open to US talks. New US Ambassador to India, Sergio Gor, says India-US trade talks remain active. Next call on the steps forward due today despite earlier deadlock in negotiations. And India to be invited to join the U.S.-led Pax Silica initiative next month as Washington signals deeper semiconductor ties and renewed push to resolve trade differences. India and Germany deepen strategic partnership with 19 agreements across defense, technology, energy and education during German Chancellor Friedrich Merz's India visit. Retail inflation rises to three-month high of 1.33% in December, but remains well below RBI's lower tolerance level of 2%. Another massive rally for silver as the white metal soars another 15,000 rupees to touch a fresh lifetime high of 2.65 lakh rupees per kg, while gold hits fresh record amid global rally and geopolitical tensions. India to host the AI Impact Summit in Delhi as Jitin Prasada says country is set to become the world's AI service provider. And Google parent Alphabet becomes the fourth company to hit the $4 trillion market cap as shares rise after Apple picks Google's Gemini to power the next AI upgrade for Siri. US President Donald Trump on Monday announced a 25% tariff on any country trading with Iran, sharply escalating pressure on Tehran amid its crackdown on domestic protests that have killed at least 648 people so far. In a post on Truth Social, US President Donald Trump said any nation doing business with Iran would face a blanket tariff on trade with the United States, calling the order final and conclusive. The move has implications for countries like India, which maintains long-standing trade and strategic ties with Iran, including cooperation on the Chabahar port project. India exports items like rice, tea, sugar, medicine, fibers, electrical equipment and artificial jewelry to Iran. And in return, India imports dry fruits, chemicals and glassware from Iran. This trade relationship plays an important role for both the countries. However, the biggest impact of 25% American tariff is likely to fall on China, given its extensive trade with both Iran and the US, potentially reviving fears of a renewed trade war. If Trump's new rule is applied strictly, goods coming from China could face a minimum total tariff of as high as 45%, much higher than the current 20%. That brings back memories of last year's US-China trade war, which shook global markets. The White House is yet to clarify how the tariff will be enforced or whether it applies only to goods or also to services. It is also unclear yet how much trade with Iran would be enough to trigger the penalty or how the US would track and enforce this rule. After formally taking charge as the United States ambassador to India, Sergio Gor has underlined that India and the US remain actively engaged in trade negotiations, with the next call on the way forward on trade talks scheduled for today. Speaking in New Delhi, Ambassador Gor acknowledged that negotiating a trade deal with India, the world's largest nation, is complex, but said Washington is determined to take the talks forward. He added that while India remains a key pillar of the relationship, India and the US will continue to work closely on security, counterterrorism, energy, technology, education and health. The renewed engagement comes at a sensitive moment, with bilateral trade negotiations hitting a deadlock earlier. Despite the setback, Gor said both sides continue to engage actively, noting that real friends can disagree but always resolve differences in the end. Listen in.
Many of you have asked me for an update on the ongoing trade deal negotiations. Both sides continue to actively engage. In fact, the next call on trade will occur tomorrow. Remember, India is the world's largest nation, so it's not an easy task to get this across the finish line, but we are determined to get there. And while trade is very important for our relationship, we will continue to work closely together on other very important areas, such as security, counterterrorism, energy, technology, education, and health.
And in yet another big strategic signal, Ambassador Gor announced that India will be invited next month to join Pax Silica, a US-led initiative aimed at building a secure and resilient silicon supply chain. The initiative is widely seen as an effort to reduce global dependence on China by bringing together trusted partner countries. While other Quad members such as Japan and Australia were included at the time of its launch, India was left out. Now, after months of being on the sidelines, India's inclusion in Pax Silica could unlock major investments and partnerships in artificial intelligence and semiconductor manufacturing. Earlier, remember, Piyush Goyal had also said that New Delhi remains in talks with Washington to bridge differences. Prime Minister Modi and US leaders have earlier set an ambitious target of finalizing a deal by fall of 2025 and doubling bilateral trade to $500 billion by 2030.
I also want to share with you today a new initiative that the United States launched just last month called Pax Silica. Pax Silica is a US-led strategic initiative to build a secure, prosperous, and innovation-driven silicon supply chain, from critical minerals and energy inputs to advanced manufacturing, semiconductors, AI development, and logistics. Nations that joined last month include Japan, South Korea, the United Kingdom, and Israel. Today, I'm pleased to announce that India will be invited to join this group of nations as a full member next month.
Meanwhile, Electronics and IT Secretary S. Krishnan said that India's inclusion in the US-led Pax Silica initiative marks a major strategic boost and that India's participation reflects growth, global trust and ensures New Delhi has a seat at the high table on securing critical minerals and supply chains. Listen in.
Well, I mean, I think the announcement has been made. I just saw something in the media today that India has been taken into the Pax Silica initiative. As we speak, my minister is in Washington attending a meeting on critical minerals. So I think from a strategic point of view, it's important that India is at the high table as far as all of these important issues are concerned. Fundamentally, it's about addressing the supply chain of critical minerals and critical materials. And it's important for a country like India to be part of that. And I think it's a recognition again of the trust.
The Union Minister Ashwini Vaishnav participated in the critical minerals ministerial meeting hosted by United States Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, aimed at strengthening and securing global critical mineral supply chains. The meeting came amid growing concerns over vulnerabilities in strategic sectors. Bessent convened a meeting of finance ministers at the United States Treasury to discuss solutions to secure and diversify supply chains for critical minerals, especially rare earth elements. In a post on X, Secretary Bessent said he was encouraged by the strong shared commitment among participating nations to quickly address key weaknesses in critical minerals. The meeting brought together finance ministers and leaders from Australia, Canada and European Union, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Mexico, the Republic of Korea and the United Kingdom, reflecting a broad international consensus on the issue. Secretary Bessent expressed his optimism that nations will pursue prudent de-risking over decoupling and that they understand well the need to remedy current deficiencies in critical minerals supply chains. All right, on this big story we have this morning, Barnik Chitran, Metro P investor, managing partner, Chrysalis Equity, joining us to just help us understand what exactly this Pax Silica means for India. Barnik, thank you so much for your time. What does India's potential inclusion in Pax Silica mean for India's mining sector, critical minerals and for the semiconductor industry?
No, I think it's a welcome initiative. I think the fact that the Americans are considering including India into the initiative talks of the role India can play. I think there's a very clear role India can play in the semiconductor supply chain, which is not limited to manufacturing. India also is the largest provider of outsourced testing services on semiconductors. If you note, some of the largest semiconductor majors have their testing services and all kind of design services out of India. So India has capabilities to offer the West. Again, we have to look at the details of what the kind of participation will entail, what this will give India access to. Please note that the Biden administration in its AI export policy had actually categorized India into a kind of an orange zone for access to US technology. So we have to see where we stand regard access to the latest semiconductors. But definitely this is a welcome initiative. I think just as this initiative offers a lot of opportunity to India, India also has meaningful role to play given its strength in services and emerging strength in manufacturing and silica, as well as semiconductors and magnets for rare earth materials.
All right. Now, what we heard from Secretary Scott Bessent is that de-risking and not decoupling from China is the initiative, is the real reason behind this initiative of Pax Silica. But practically speaking, even with the grouping, with the coming together of so many other nations, is any sort of decoupling from China even possible given its vast access to critical minerals and its manufacturing capabilities?
See, let's be clear, the intent is decoupling, it's not de-risking, right? So I think Secretary Bessent is walking a very narrow line because the Chinese are known to be reasonably thin-skinned. They've also shown to respond quite fiercely to any kind of insinuations and attacks. But let's be clear, what the US is trying to do through this initiative is actually creating a viable supply chain so that the dependence on China is far lower than what they have today. If you look at critical minerals, for example, China has full ownership of the end-to-end supply chain, right from access to rare earth mines to 90% of the refining capacity of rare earth minerals around the world to over 75% of the magnet manufacturing capacity around the world. So China has a very dominant posture. I think what the US is trying to do is, again, drive US ownership across different parts of the value chain. I think getting countries together is one part of the initiative. The other initiative, which has also been run quite successfully out of the new Department of War, is strategic investments into mines and refining capacity outside China. This is something which has quietly been going on for the last year in the Trump administration. And again, let's be clear, right? There is going to be two clear blocks on rare earth. I think the US and the Western countries, India included, are desperate to not only diversify away, but stop depending on China. So I think while de-risking is the short-term objective, I think decoupling is very clearly part on the minds of the Americans and also other Western regions, particularly given the fact that China had nearly $1.5 trillion trade surplus last year, which all countries accept is unfeasible, unrealistic, right? And the only way to get away from that is to build your own manufacturing and refining capabilities.
All right. And coming back to India's inclusion in the Pax Silica initiative, Barnik, do you think that there is real value that the US sees India bringing to the table, or is this some sort of a deal sweetener to get India back on the table to discuss the larger trade deal, which has been pending for about a year now?
See, knowing the administration, I would say it's a little bit of both, right? I think you have to note Howard Lutnick went on public media like a couple of weeks back to claim that he had already sealed a trade deal, but the Indians never called the president to formalize it. So again, it seems that from a trade deal point of view, the Americans have done the best and the Indians seem to be reticent.
Yeah, so but that's something India denied, didn't it? India said that that was never the real reason, and there were 8 occasions on which Prime Minister Modi and President Donald Trump had spoken. Anyway,
but I think let's assume that there is a little bit of truth to both sides, right? But again, see, the most important, I would say, thing to look out for is that we now have a full-time ambassador, American ambassador to India after a while, right? Yeah. And Sergio Gor is also reasonably well reputed to be part of the inner orbit of the administration as well as the MAGA movement. Right. So he definitely has a voice and he does have a say. I think he comes bearing gifts, right? I think so. Pax Silica is one of the gifts he brings on board to again get the Indians onto the negotiating table and to agree on something. But I would say this is a little bit of both. Right? It's also to sweeten the deal, but also to ensure that the US doesn't turn away India with its manufacturing and, more importantly, its software and testing capabilities from the Pax Silica alliance. But because the other alternative, India aligning with the Chinese bloc on this, is something which will be unthinkable for the Americans. So again, as with Trump, you have to look at all kinds of motivations behind transactions. It is very transactional. So I think let's see how the call today goes on trade and see if there are any positive announcements at the end of the day by the Americans. All right, Barnik Chitran Mehta, thank you so much for your time and for giving your perspective on this very important and developing story. Thank you so much. And with that, we will slip into a very short break, but a lot more coming up after the break. Stay tuned to News 9.
लूजर। लाइफ हो या इन्वेस्टिंग, ओवर कॉन्फिडेंस से नुकसान भी हो सकता है। म्यूचुअल फंड अपनाओ और थोड़ी हेवी लिफ्टिंग एक्सपर्ट्स को भी करने दो।
म्यूचुअल फंड निवेश बाजार जोखिमों के अधीन है। योजना से संबंधित सभी दस्तावेजों को ध्यान से पढ़ें।
इंडिया, ये तेरे लिए, तेरा नाम गूंजे, ये जिद है मेरी।
नए फैसलों के साथ तू आगे बढ़े, ये जिद है मेरी।
तेरे घर सपनों से बने, जिद छे मारी।
तेरे हर इरादे को हौसला मिले, जिद ए अमर।
जब तो बोले तो दुनिया सुने, पिडिवादम एनेतेयेदो।
मेरी कहानी से इंडिया की कामयाबी लिखूं। जिद है साडी। जब आप अपनी तरक्की की जिद पर अड़ते हो तो इंडिया की जीत होती है। इस जिद में आपके साथ गर्व से है टाटा कैपिटल। टाटा कैपिटल, जिद तरक्की की।
Back, you're watching News 9. This is Morning Brief at 9. Now, India and Germany have taken a major step forward in their strategic partnership, signing a wide-ranging set of agreements across defense, technology, energy, education, as well as people-to-people ties. The agreements were signed on Monday as German Chancellor Friedrich Merz began a two-day official visit to India. According to the Ministry of External Affairs, the two sides concluded as many as 19 agreements and policy initiatives aimed at deepening cooperation across strategic, economic and human resource domains. A key highlight was the joint declaration of intent on defense industrial cooperation, which focuses on co-innovation and co-production. Now, speaking at the India-Germany CEOs Forum, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said the move would provide clear policy backing to companies from both countries, while also opening new avenues for cooperation in emerging areas such as space. Listen in.
हम सबको इस बात पर पूरी क्लैरिटी है कि इंडिया जर्मनी पार्टनरशिप न केवल म्यूचुअल बेनिफिशियल है, बल्कि यह दुनिया के लिए भी बेहतर है। भारत ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन, सोलर, विंड और बायोफ्यूल में वर्ल्ड लीडर बनने की दिशा में आगे बढ़ रहा है। इसमें जर्मन कंपनीज के लिए सोलर सेल्स, इलेक्ट्रोलाइजर्स, बैटरीज और विंड टर्बाइन्स जैसे क्षेत्रों में मैन्युफैक्चरिंग की बहुत अपॉर्चुनिटीज हैं। हम मिलकर ई मोबिलिटी से लेकर फूड और हेल्थ सिक्योरिटी तक दुनिया के लिए सॉल्यूशंस विकसित कर सकते हैं।
Okay, economic engagement was another major focus. India and Germany agreed to strengthen business ties by establishing a CEO forum integrated into the joint India-Germany Economic and Investment Committee aimed at boosting investment flows and corporate collaboration. Now, in the area of critical and emerging technologies, multiple declarations of intent were signed. Now, these include partnerships on building a semiconductor ecosystem, cooperation on critical minerals and collaboration in the telecommunication space. Now, energy and sustainability featured prominently in the outcome. An offtake agreement was signed between India's AM Green and Germany's Uniper Global Commodities for the supply of green ammonia. An MOU was also inked between India's Petroleum and Natural Gas Regulatory Board and Germany's DVGW to cooperate in renewable energy and gas infrastructure. On education and skills, the two countries adopted a roadmap on higher education and agreed on skilling and mobility initiatives. Now, this includes setting up a National Center of Excellence for Skilling in Renewable Energy at the National Skill Training Institute in Hyderabad. Back home, retail inflation edged up to a three-month high of 1.33% in the month of December, driven largely by higher prices of select food items. But it continued to remain well below the Reserve Bank of India's lower tolerance level of 2%. According to data released by the National Statistics Office, CPI-based headline inflation rose from 0.71% in November, though it was still sharply lower than the 5.22% recorded in December 2024. Inflation had stood at 1.44% in September, indicating a modest upward trend in recent months. Now, food inflation, however, stayed in negative territory for the seventh consecutive month at minus 2.71% in December compared to minus 3.91% in November. A sharp divergence was seen between regions. Urban inflation came in higher at 2.03% compared to 0.76% in rural areas. Now, retail inflation has now remained below the RBI's lower tolerance limit for the fourth straight month, even as the central bank targets inflation at 4% with a 2% margin on either side. Among states, Kerala recorded the highest inflation at 9.49%, followed by Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu. In contrast, inflation was negative in states including Assam, Bihar, Haryana, Madhya Pradesh, Odisha and Uttar Pradesh. December also marks the final reading under the 2012 CPI series. From Jan, inflation will be calculated under a new CPI base year of 2024, with the revised series set to be released in February. And moving to commodities now, silver and gold prices surged to fresh record highs on Monday, tracking strong gains in global markets amid rising geopolitical tensions and growing expectations of further U.S. interest rate cuts. In the national capital, silver jumped sharply by 15,000 rupees or 6% to hit a fresh all-time high of 2,65,000 rupees per kg, according to the All India Sarafa Association. The metal had closed at the 2,50,000 per kg mark in the previous session. Gold also scaled a new peak. Gold of 99.9% purity rose by 2,900 rupees or just over 2% to touch a new lifetime high of 1,44,600 rupees per 10 grams compared to 1,41,700 rupees per 10 grams on Friday. The rally was mirrored in overseas markets. Spot gold surged past the $4,600 per ounce mark for the first time ever, gaining nearly 2%. Spot silver also jumped nearly 6%, hitting a fresh high of $84.61 per ounce. And shifting focus now to the markets, Wall Street, the S&P 500 and the Dow Jones Industrial Average closed at record highs on Monday, powered by gains in technology stocks and retail giant Walmart. Markets largely looked past concerns surrounding a U.S. Justice Department criminal probe involving Fed Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, focusing instead on earnings momentum and rate cut expectations.
U.S. stocks gained ground Monday, with the Dow and S&P 500 rising fractionally but notching record closing highs, while the Nasdaq climbed 0.25%. Shares of technology companies and Walmart advanced. The retail giant rose 3% as it prepares to join the Nasdaq 100 index next week, a shift that could draw in billions of dollars from passive index funds. Investors brushed aside concerns about the U.S. Justice Department's criminal investigation of Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, ostensibly focused on comments he made to Congress about a building renovation project. Powell called the move a pretext to gain more influence over interest rates that President Donald Trump has pressed to cut sharply since he returned to office. Investors are looking ahead to the fourth quarter U.S. earnings season, which unofficially begins Tuesday with results from J.P. Morgan Chase and other big banks. Todd Alston, Chief Investment Officer with Parnassus Investments, says he expects corporate profits to remain solid.
Earnings growth looks really strong. We look at the S&P, and as of today, it looks like it's slated for 14 to 15% earnings growth, and so that's good. Number two is, while the AI Magnificent Seven, part of those earnings, seems still positioned to grow high teens this year, we still see a broadening this year of the S&P, shall you call it, 493. And that should be a positive as the earnings growth strengthens to low double digits for the remainder of the S&P. So the earnings picture looks pretty solid.
Other stocks on the move included Abercrombie & Fitch, which plunged nearly 18% after the retailer lowered its annual sales outlook. It was one of several retailers that indicated sales during the key holiday quarter were affected by cautious discretionary spending. That impacted the stocks of other chains like Macy's, which fell more than 5%.
All right, from Wall Street, let's shift focus now to Dalal Street. And Indian markets opened much higher, up about 0.3 to 0.4% on Sensex and Nifty before some profit taking, now pretty much bringing the markets in the flat territory. Although we are still seeing some positive streaks on the market this morning, but nothing like what we saw in the first 10 minutes or so of trading. Markets right now are pretty much flat, almost exactly at the levels that they closed at yesterday, with the Nifty 50 at about 25,793 points and the Sensex at about 83,878 points or so. Volatility in the market is also flat. Remember, volatility was extremely high yesterday, up about 5% or so, but this morning holding at about 11.36 or so. Let's move on now to the Nifty 50 heat map and try and see which are the sectors which were gaining and are now losing some ground. Well, we saw the IT sector actually open handsomely in the green Now, this morning, investors perhaps now rebalancing their positions, especially in light of the Q3 earnings announced by TCS and HCL Tech. And both these stocks are now down. TCS down about 0.5% or so after its net profit was down, reported down about 14% or so year-on-year. Similar story coming in from HCL Tech, where the net profit is down about 11%. The stock is down about 0.71% or so in trade. Meanwhile, Reliance Industries down about almost 1% or so this morning. This could be potentially triggered by the announcement that came by US President Donald Trump this morning about an additional 25% tariff on countries trading with Iran, and potentially the chances of Iran now going into potentially an active conflict could create some sort of a havoc in the energy markets and oil prices. Beyond that, if you look at the banking stocks, HDFC Bank and ICICI Bank, HDFC up almost 0.8% or so in trade this morning. Remember, HDFC and ICICI Bank are both due to announce their earnings this week as well. Otherwise, mixed signals, a little bit of streak of red visible in the pharma space. Sun Pharma, Dr. Reddy, Cipla, all perhaps reeling under the threat of additional 25% tariff, which may become applicable to India as well, given the latest remarks coming in from US President Donald Trump. Let's take it all one by one. Kranti Batini joins us this morning for his views on all that's happening in the Indian stock markets. Kranti, good morning. Thank you so much for your time. We saw a massive rally yesterday in the second half, and this happened soon after Sergio Gor, the new US ambassador, said that the trade deal with US is pretty much on the table still, and the next call is likely to happen today. We saw positive momentum in the markets, but this morning sentiments are a little sour, could be potentially due to HCL Tech and TCS and their earnings, which you're seeing in the equity markets, but also the new announcement of the 25% additional tariff on countries trading with Iran.
Yeah, Karthik, good morning to you. Yeah, we witnessed a strong rebound in the market. Yesterday, it seems to be it was losing the ground. The crucial support zone of 25,500 got violated during the day. But thanks to some kind of a positive commentary with respect to the trade deal is concerned, with respect to the new ambassador to India, the kind of bonding he have with President Trump, that gives a positive, not a momentum, some kind of a solace to the markets that help the market to sustain the crucial zone of 25,500, and we witnessed a rebound in the markets. But still, the FIs have been in the selling sphere only. They need much more greater clarity, but thanks to the DIS who stood and they bought for the tune of more than 5,000 crores yesterday. So overall, we are seeing the texture of Indian market at this point of time is buy on dips and sell on rally kind of a mode. And markets last week, they were in a oversold zone. And yesterday, we witnessed some kind of a short covering in the range of 25,500 that helped the market to move above the 25,700 range. That's where we are witnessing. This morning, the Asian cues have been positive, but as we progressing into the day, we need to see how the day is going to pan out. Any uprise, we are not finding any kind of an incremental rise in the market. In the morning, we opened at a positive note, but still at this point of time, we are at a flattish kind of a zone at this point of time. We are into the earnings season. How the company earnings are going to pan out, that's makes the Nifty and Sensex to sustain these levels. So a lot of companies are going to declare the results. Around 30 to 40% of the Nifty companies which have a weightage on Nifty, they are going to declare the results by this weekend.
Right.
So market is closely observing the earnings season, and also we have the big budget policy action that's going to come. So market is tracking these moves, and overall that how the Trump moves and also the geopolitical environment that is going to weigh on the market, Karthik, in the medium to short term.
Absolutely. So a lot for investors to digest at this point of time. But let's take it one by one. Let's start with the earnings season, which kicked off yesterday. TCS and HCL Tech both announcing their numbers. And if you look at TCS, revenue saw a year-on-year dip of about 2.6%, though still holding at about $7.5 billion or so. But the worry really came on the margins, with net profit down about 14% or so. But there was a green streak as well in the earnings yesterday, Kranti, wasn't it? And that was on account of AI revenue shoring up for TCS. That saw a growth of about 17%, now standing at about $1.8 billion. So there is some sort of a glimmer of hope when it comes to India's AI services story, isn't it?
Absolutely, Karthik. That's where the stock could able to sustain today. And that brought some kind of a positivity. The AI and the future businesses like data center and the new initiatives and acquisitions they did, that gives some kind of a comfort to the stock in the medium to short term. And also a lot of looming uncertainty around the US economy. If we observe the US economy, the pendulum is moving between extreme optimism and extreme pessimism. One hand, the tariffs and the measures taken by the Trump administration, they're going to create some kind of extraordinary growth for US economy. This is one sort of theory that is playing. The other hand side is the kind of measures taken by US administration and the kind of geopolitical uncertainty they are creating, that's going to spoil the US balance sheet and Federal Reserve. What's happening, we are just observing. So these kind of things creating the negativity on the another hand. So the pendulum is moving between the extreme optimism and extreme pessimism. So coming to TCS, as long as even the Indian IT companies, as long as the pendulum is moving towards the positivity of extreme optimism of US, we are witnessing some kind of a buying interest in the Indian IT companies on a medium to long term. But when the pendulum is moving to the extreme pessimism, we are witnessing some kind of a sell-off. That's what we are witnessing in the IT space at this point of time. By and large, if the investors are a long-term investor, just TCS is the stock to look. The kind of initiatives and the AI space they're developing, that's going to be a positive trigger for the company in the next coming future.
Absolutely. So positive trigger, but what we also noticed in the TCS story was the sharp decline in headcount by about 25,000 employees or so. Meanwhile, headcount holding pretty much constant for HCL, which let go of just about a net of 261 odd people. I want to quickly get your view now on another sector, and this happens to be the energy stocks, Kranti, very quickly. We are seeing a massive dip in Reliance Industries today, and could this be potentially because of the fear of rising crude prices, given all the turmoil that we are seeing in Iran?
Karthik, see, rising crude oil prices are going to have a balanced impact on Reliance Industries.
Okay.
One thing is, when the crude oil rises, the petrochemical business of Reliance Industries is going to gain. When the crude oil comes down, the refining capacities, the utilization will go up. Reliance have a more hedged business model. So by and large, the warning of US Trump administration on Iranian oil, because India is one of the country which imports a substantial chunk of Iranian oil, that's going to have impact in the medium to short term. But in future, the Venezuelan oil is getting pumped into the world. So that can give some kind of a comfort in the coming days. So there is a lot of things that are happening around the oil at this point of time, Karthik. You and me need to, and the investors need to observe how this entire episode of pumping of oil is going to take place in the coming months and weeks.
Absolutely. Well, let's leave it at that for now. Kranti Bhattini, thank you so much. As always, pleasure having you here with us on News9.
Thank you, Karthik.
And with that, we will slip into another very short break. A lot more coming up on the other side of the break. You're watching News9.
भारत की सबसे बड़ी गोल्ड लोन एनबीएफसी मुथूट फाइनेंस से गोल्ड लोन लीजिए और फिर देखिए सोना क्या नहीं कर सकता। कॉल कीजिए 1-800-313-1212।
With Skoda Supercare and growing network across 180 plus cities, you never drive alone.
Skoda.
Welcome back. You're watching News9. This is Morning Brief at 9. Let's quickly look at all the global headlines that we're tracking for you this morning. U.S. President Donald Trump announces sweeping new 25% tariff targeting any nation trading with Iran, tightening pressure on key partners like China and India as rights groups say at least 648 protesters have been killed in Iran's crackdown. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei hailed state-backed demonstrations as a warning to the United States after 2 weeks of nationwide anti-government protests. U.S. President Donald Trump once again wants to take over of Greenland, says Washington's acquisition would not be a short-term deal. Former U.S. Federal Reserve leaders condemn a U.S. criminal investigation into Chair Jerome Powell, calling it an unprecedented assault on central bank independence. US and UK bank shares fall after Donald Trump proposes a one-year cap on credit card interest rates, threatening a major source of lender profits. Apple and Google strike a multi-year AI partnership that will see Google's Gemini technology power Apple's upcoming artificial intelligence tools, including Siri. Paramount Skydance files a lawsuit seeking more transparency after Warner Brothers Discovery rejects its all-cash takeover bid and presses ahead with a Netflix agreement. British media watchdog Ofcom launches an investigation into Elon Musk's X after its Grok AI tool was found creating inappropriate deepfake images. And the European Commission says Chinese electric vehicle firms could sidestep tariffs by agreeing to minimum prices and boosting investment inside EU, reshaping competition in Europe's EV market. All right, U.S. President Donald Trump has warned that the United States will take control of Greenland one way or the other, citing national security concerns linked to Russia and China. Trump said Greenland's strategic location and mineral wealth make it vital for U.S. security, dismissing objections from Denmark and Greenland's leadership, who insist the island's future must be decided by its people. Listening to the U.S. president.
We're talking about acquiring, not leasing, not having it short term. We're talking about acquiring. And if we don't do it, Russia or China will, and that's not going to happen when I'm president.
Are you going to increase the amount of military bases on Greenland in the meantime?
Well, we have bases on Greenland. Yeah.
Are you going to make more?
I can put a lot of soldiers there right now if I want, but you need more than that. You need ownership. You really need title, as they say in the real estate business.
Well, a growing number of Republican lawmakers are voicing concern over the Trump administration's threat to indict U.S. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. Now, two senators warned they could block Trump's future central bank nominees, while another urged federal investigators to quickly end the probe, citing risks to the Fed's independence. Take a look.
A growing number of Republicans in Congress voiced concern on Monday over the Trump administration's threat to indict Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. Senator Tom Tillis was the first to announce plans to resist the Justice Department's criminal investigation into Powell. Columbia Law School professor Catherine Judge explains.
Senator Tom Tillis, a Republican who is on the banking committee, has expressed significant concerns about this development and has vowed not to move forward with the nomination hearings for Powell's successor as chair until this matter is resolved. So part of what we're seeing here is this might actually trigger backlash that really undermines President Trump's ability to pursue his agenda as he had hoped.
The DOJ's investigation concerns allegations that Powell misled Congress in testimony related to a renovation of the Fed's headquarters complex in Washington.
Wait, do you expect any more additional cost overruns?
Republican Senator Kevin Cramer criticized cost overruns on that project, but said, quote, "I do not believe, however, he is a criminal." He also said he hoped the investigation would end quickly, adding, quote, "We need to restore confidence in the Fed."
Nobody thinks that Chair Powell willfully misled Congress, as would be required for the criminal indictment to really come through and come to fruition. The real concern here is that you're using levers that are meant to be used solely for purposes of true criminal activity and instead being used for political ends.
This new threat is not about my testimony last June.
Powell called the administration's move a pretext to influence interest rates after a long-running pressure campaign to dramatically lower them.
The right thing is to lower interest rates.
The DOJ's move sent rates on longer-term U.S. Treasury bonds higher as investors parsed what a less independent Fed could mean for inflation and monetary policy. Former Fed chairs Janet Yellen, Ben Bernanke, and Alan Greenspan joined with former federal government economic policy leaders from both political parties in raising the alarm over a less independent Fed. But on Monday, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt denied Trump's direct involvement.
Did the president ever direct DOJ officials to open an investigation into Powell?
No. One thing for sure, the president's made it quite clear, is Jerome Powell is bad at his job. As for whether or not Jerome Powell is a criminal, that's an answer the Department of Justice is going to have to find out.
A Justice Department spokesperson declined to comment on the case, but added, the Attorney General has instructed her U.S. attorneys to prioritize investigating any abuse of taxpayer dollars.
Moving on now, U.S. financial stocks and UK-listed banks fell on Monday after President Donald Trump called for a one-year cap on credit card interest rates, threatening a key profit stream for lenders. The proposal weighed on global indices, sparking concerns across the banking sector.
U.S. financial stocks and UK-listed lenders fell on Monday and weighed on global indexes. Investors were worried by President Donald Trump's call for a one-year cap on credit card interest rates. Such a move would threaten a key revenue stream for the industry. Trump's comments raised concerns over the sector, with investors already dealing with market uncertainty. Trump on Friday called for a 10% cap on the interest rate on credit cards starting January 20th. He didn't give details on how he planned to make the companies comply. Shares of JP Morgan Chase were down 2.5% in early trade, while Bank of America fell over 1.5%. Citigroup fell just under 4%, while Wells Fargo also dipped. British bank Barclays shares touched their lowest in close to a month. One leading analyst said US card operations make up just over a tenth of Barclays' profits. Credit card lender American Express was also down over 5%. While payment processors Visa and MasterCard each slipped close to 3%. Some analysts said imposing a limit on rates would need legislation and could exceed presidential authority. Another top analyst said a 10% interest rate is well below the national average credit card rate of 21%.
All right, now Google parent Alphabet has officially joined the exclusive $4 trillion market cap club, becoming just the fourth company to hit the milestone. Alphabet shares rose about 1% on Monday after Apple said it will use Google's Gemini technology as the foundation for its artificial intelligence models and the next generation of Siri. The stock closed at about $331.86 a share, taking Alphabet's market value just above the $4 trillion mark. Alphabet now joins Nvidia, Microsoft and Apple as the only companies to cross the $4 trillion threshold. Nvidia and Microsoft first reached the milestone in July, while Apple crossed it in October. Since then, however, Apple and Microsoft have slipped back below the $4 trillion mark. And with that, we will slip into another very short break. But coming up on the other side, why is Paramount Skydance filing a lawsuit against Warner Discovery Brothers? We'll tell you that on the other side of the break.
फाइनली हमारा घर।
तुम्हारी जिद का नतीजा।
मैं नहीं होती तो तुम्हारा क्या होता?
इनकी जिद ने आज इन्हें दिया एक परमानेंट एड्रेस टाटा कैपिटल होम लोन्स के साथ।
Welcome back. You're watching News9. Well, Paramount Skydance has filed a lawsuit in Delaware against Warner Brothers Discovery, seeking greater disclosure on asset valuations and details of the Hollywood studio's deal with Netflix. The legal move follows WBD's board decision to reject Paramount's revised all-cash takeover offer. Take a look.
Paramount Skydance on Monday sued Warner Brothers Discovery for more information on a rival deal worth nearly $83 billion with Netflix. The move escalates a battle to take control of one of the most storied Hollywood studios. The David Ellison-led company also said it plans to nominate directors to Warner Brothers Discovery's board. This is one of the most aggressive steps yet to convince shareholders that its hostile bid is superior to the offer from Netflix. The CBS parent and Netflix have been in a heated battle for Warner Brothers, its prized film and television studios, and its extensive content library that includes Harry Potter and the DC Comics universe. In a letter to shareholders, Paramount also said it would propose an amendment to Warner Brothers bylaws that would require shareholder approval for any separation of the media giant's cable TV business, which is key to the Netflix deal. The amended offer had included $40 billion in equity, personally guaranteed by Oracle's co-founder Larry Ellison, the father of Paramount CEO David Ellison. Netflix and Warner Brothers did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Warner Brothers Discovery shares fell as much as 2% in morning trading, while Paramount and Netflix rose about 1% each.
And finally, Britain will enact a new law this week criminalizing the creation of non-consensual intimate images online, including deepfakes. The move comes as the regulator Ofcom investigates X, increasing pressure on Elon Musk's social media platform.
The platforms that host such material must be held accountable, including X.
Britain's technology minister Liz Kendall told Parliament on Monday that it will bring into effect a law this week that criminalizes the creation of non-consensual intimate images. It comes after media regulator Ofcom launched an investigation into Elon Musk's X over concerns its Grok AI chatbot was creating sexually intimate deepfake images in violation of its duty to protect people in the UK from illegal content.
Lives can and have been devastated by this content. They are not harmless images. They're weapons of abuse, disproportionately aimed at women and girls. And they are illegal.
The Ofcom probe mounts pressure on Musk's X, which already faces growing public outcry, as well as criminal and regulatory probes around the world, including in France and India. When asked on Monday about the investigation, X pointed to a previous statement in which it said it takes action against illegal content on the platform by removing it, permanently suspending accounts, and working with governments and law enforcement as necessary. X said it has restricted requests to undress people in images to paying users only, a step Kendall said doesn't go far enough.
It is insulting to victims to say, you can still have this service if you're willing to pay. And it is monetizing abuse.
Kendall also said the government would keep under review its decision to continue using X as a means of communication. Following initial action against porn sites that did not have effective age checks, the Grok case will likely be the first big test of Britain's online safety law, which was enacted in 2023 but is being implemented in stages by Ofcom.
घर है